In this video, we're going to talk about similarities between Cameroon and Ivory Coast. This video is in no way trying to say which country is better than another. It's just to point out some similarities that I noticed between Ivory Coast and Cameroon. I'm not here to explain to you how I got to Ivory Coast, how long I stayed in Ivory Coast, or how I found Ivory Coast. Now, this is just one of the reasons why I am doing this video. When I got to Ivory Coast, I started putting videos about me, a Cameroonian, being in Ivory Coast. The comments I got in the comment section were just like everywhere. I had to dig deep into the root of the matter to discover where this uproar was from. During the video, I'm going to explain further into what I just outlined. Oh, by the way, my name is Victorine. I'm a content creator from Cameroon. I love to travel around Africa and share my experiences with you all. So let's just get into the similarities between Cameroon and Ivory Coast. The first similarity between both countries is that both countries are found on the west coast of Africa. Now, geographically, they are all in West Africa. Ivory Coast is in West Africa, registered in West Africa, and is under the ECOWAS, which is the Economic Community of West African States. Now, Cameroon, on the other hand, geographically is on the west, as in, this is the map here, and tell me this is not West Africa. But Cameroon is part of the CEMAC zone, which is the Economic and Monetary Community of Central Africa. Communauté économique et monétaire de l'Afrique centrale. So that's what it means in French. Both countries being on the west coast of Africa means that both countries are bordered by the Atlantic Ocean, which automatically stipulates port activities happening in the country, which serves as part of the revenue for the country. The economic capital of both countries are close to the port for obvious reasons. The economic capital of Ivory Coast is Abidjan, a port city and the largest city in the country. So all the port activities happen around Abidjan. Same for the economic capital of Cameroon, which is Douala. Now, the next similarity between Ivory Coast and Cameroon is that both countries, and this is going to be a sans commentaire kind of point, I'm just going to state, and then if you have something to talk about it, let us talk about it in the comment section. Now, both countries carry a name given to them by Portuguese traders in the 15th century. Now, this was very common in the early 15th century. When European traders came to Africa, they identified unnamed territories based on the resources, natural resources that they found in those colonies. We have Cameroon, which was called Rio dos Cameros by the Portuguese traders because they came to Cameroon, and in the River Wouri they found so much prawns, so they named the territory River of Prawns. Now, this name Rio dos Cameros was later translated and transformed in 1984 to the Republic of Cameroon. Now, this is the same process that happened with Ivory Coast. When the Portuguese traders came to Ivory Coast, they found so much ivory in the country and on the coast, so they called the country Costa du Marfin, which translates directly as Coast of Ivory. Now, this was later translated to Ivory Coast, and in 1986 the country's name was changed to Côte d'Ivoire. Are we communicating? Does that make sense? So in my mind, I said I wasn't going to do a comment, but I cannot help it. I just wonder what these territories were called. Maybe something I had to study on or stuff like that, but I wonder what these territories were called before the arrival of the Portuguese traders in the 15th century. But that's not the purpose of this video. Let's go to the next similarity. Both countries were under the protectorate of the French during the scramble for Africa. Thus, the language that is spoken in both countries are French spoken in Côte d'Ivoire and in Cameroon. Now, it's a little different from Cameroon because Cameroon was under the protectorate of the English and the French. So one part of Cameroon speaks English, which is the site that I am from. Even though I live in the capital city, which is Yaoundé, and the main language spoken there is French, but where I was born and raised and where my family is at is the English side of Cameroon. So that's the only difference, but both countries were under the protectorate of France and are still very much under the influence of France. On to the next point. Both countries use a currency called the CFA franc. Both countries use a currency which is not dias. Cameroon uses the Central African franc, which is the XAF, written XAF, while Ivory Coast uses the West African franc, written as the ZOF. The currencies almost have the same value. The West African franc can only be used in territories in West Africa, while the Central African franc can be used in countries within the CEMAC zone. The next similarity between Ivory Coast and Cameroon is that Cameroon and Ivory Coast are one of the 4 African countries that produce 70% of the world's cocoa beans. Now, with Ivory Coast, of course, producing like the majority, the 4 African countries that produce like this percentage of the world cocoa beans. We have Ghana, we have Cameroon, we have Nigeria, and we have Ivory Coast. This is because these people are very hardworking and their soil is very, very fertile for the production of agricultural produce. Now, apart from this, both countries are blessed with natural resources such as timber, oil and gas, agricultural products like cassava, cocoa, coffee, you can name the rest. So both countries have like good soil for agriculture. We already mentioned that the sport activities happening in both countries because they are bordered by the Atlantic Ocean. So let's just get that. Now the next thing, which is a similarity between Ivory Coast and Cameroon, and I feel like this is where, let's talk about that in the comment section. If you don't know, like Nigeria and Ghana beef, Cameroon and Ivory Coast also have like a sibling rivalry going on. I don't know where that is from, but I think the point I'm trying to raise is like part of where the thing is from. Both countries have a sportsmanship prowess. This is not only in the Olympics, but we also have sports like football, which is very prominent. Now, when it comes to sportsmanship between both countries, we have reference names, especially in football. Like we have the Samuel Eto'o, we have the Didier Drogba. Both countries, they have these names that create like a standard of excellence in African football. I mentioned this in some video I did about Ivory Coast. I think the video is up already. I was talking about the treasures that are found in Ivory Coast. While I was talking about that video, I mentioned that Ivory Coast will be hosting the AFCON 2024 and that the last country that hosted the AFCON was Cameroon. Now, during that AFCON, there was some uproar, you know, after the match between Ivory Coast and Cameroon, and there was like tension everywhere. And when that happened, I discovered that, okay, it's not just from here. Like Cameroon and Ivory Coast, they've been having this thing going on. It's mostly common with the French side of Cameroon because we in the English side of Cameroon, we did not know that this was happening. Details will not be spoken by my mouth, but ever since then I got to know that, okay, there's some light sibling tension going on. I also got to notice that when I did videos about Ivory Coast and I got comments like, get out of our country, some of the comments I got from the comment section were like that, like, get out of our country and stuff like that. But honestly, my time in Ivory Coast, I met the nicest people and they were just so friendly. It's when I left Ivory Coast that I now heard that Cameroonians are saying that Ivorians are rude and stuff like that. All of it is just sibling rivalry. I think there are better things to fight about. Let's spread positive vibes, okay? Thank you all for watching this video. I hope that you learned something from me. In the comment section, if you're Cameroonian staying in Ivory Coast or you're Ivorian staying in Cameroon, oh, if you're Ivorian and you're in Cameroon, please reach out. My Instagram is Bitakwe. Just reach out and let's chat. So if you're in either positions or you just know about both territories, in the comment section, please give us more similarities and maybe let's talk about it. Let's talk about the differences apart from the development, because that's just something that we cannot start talking about it today. It's not going to end. It's not going to. I don't want something that will come and catch me in my house and beat me because I opened my mouth and said something that's okay, so let's talk about that in the comment section. Thank you for watching. I hope that this video made sense to you. Give it a thumbs up if it did. Leave the comment down below and I will see you all in my next video.